have a look at this question here. This is the kind of question you might get in design, technology or engineering. So let's have a look at what it's all about. Designers sometimes choose materials according to their impact on society and environment. Examples include the use of fair trade cotton, recycled components and biodegradable packaging. Evaluate how the use of such materials might be seen as an ethical choice. So it's something for us to think about. What's really important here is that they talk society and they talk environment, they talk about stuff being fair trade, and we talk about recycled, and we talk about biodegradable packaging. So these are things that we must make sure we talk about. So if we were answering this type of question, we must ensure we do this. It's a good idea to underline and highlight things that are really important. So let's have a quick look at, say, fair trade to begin with. So if we were looking at, so let's think fair trade. So we think, what is fair trade? So we think fair trade. Now fair trade, that's all about, it's all about wages. It's all about wages. So it's fair wages to the workers. So the wages have got to be fair, and it's got to be consistent. Okay, it's got to be consistent. So they know they're going to get these wages, and they can rely on this. So that using fair trade, it's got to think of an ethical choice, because the society, so the people it's working for, are using this, are getting fair wages and are getting consistent wages. But at the same time, it does something else. It does directly help the society. So it directly helps society by working on healthcare. So it does. So this can be both in terms of funding sort of education. So funding health-based education, and it can also be to do with actually like building or funding the building of hospitals. Okay, and when I say funding education, this is education of the people using it, so they know how to be, the importance of washing their hands, the importance of clean drinking water, things like that. So that is all linked to things that fair trade do to help society. But they also help society through education. Okay, so for education, so through links to schools, and sort of working with teachers and things like that. So fair trade does a lot. It works with wages, so people make sure people are paid fairly and consistently, helps society in terms of healthcare, funding education for healthy living, and perhaps funding building of hospitals, and they help the education, the schools, and to make sure people are educated better. They also, equality is something they're very good at. 23% of people who have used a fair trade, so the actual employees, so the people working, working on the cotton, so talk about fair trade cotton, so people linked to cotton there. Out of that, I think people who use that fair trade things are actually 23% are women, which is quite high for some parts of the world. So that's really good. So it helps with equality, and it empowers the women. So I think it's very important. So they're the kind of things I would talk about to do with fair trade, how it helps society. So you can say why it's really important, okay? And you can say it makes an ethical choice. People believe in these things. So we might have these things over here. So in England, we might have fair wages, we might have consistent wages, we might have all this healthcare already here. But it's an ethical choice to put back into those countries which don't have everything, don't have things quite as well as we do over here. Right, and then we can look at these two. So the other two things we can look at, things like recycled components. Now, that can be quite a big bit you can make it into if you wanted to. So you think recycled things, this is obviously good for the environment. Okay, so the obvious one, this reduces waste. Okay, brilliant. So it just reduces waste. But there's more to it than that. So recycled components also means perhaps you need to people buy less. Okay, and so all of a sudden we're thinking ethical choices. If you're buying recycled, if you're using recycled components, there's less waste, people buy less, and there's less made. There's fewer components made. So if there's less things made, I mean, there's fewer transportation issues around the world, which can be good. There's obviously negative sides to these things. You know, the less we use, the fewer the jobs. So I think maybe, you know, there's two sides to every coin, but that's something important to consider. There are less things made if we use recycled components, less waste, we buy less. Okay, these things are important. So these are things that affect the environment. So there are things to consider in terms of the environment and what makes that an ethical choice. Okay, you can give some examples there. Okay, because it talks about components. So perhaps we talk about things that might be recycled. So you think what could be on the top of what would be something that would come to your head. You could very much think electronic goods. So you might have seen some like refurbished laptops and things. All that's kind of recycled, so you can count all that. So you can give some examples in there as well, how those components are better. And it does mean perhaps we need to, if we buy less, you make less. Maybe that's, you know, there's less mining. So we've got, if it, you know, making less, that means there's reduction in transport, which is what I said earlier, and then there's also the whole reduction in actual raw materials. So transport and raw materials. So they're the kind of things that we can talk about in terms of recycled, using recycled components. And then the next thing we can look at here, biodegradable. So it talks about biodegradable packaging. So think about what biodegradable means. That means stuff that you could think of it that things that break down naturally. So if you think to yourself, if you were to leave paper outside, biodegrades, it breaks down. It, you know, it won't be very long until that paper's broken. And so cardboard and wood, so but things are biodegradable. So using biodegradable things, this is so it's reduced landfill. So an easy one, which is reduction of landfill things. It also means there's, if they biodegrade, this means less effort's needed. Okay, so this is there's a reduction in the energy required to dispose of products, because even if you're going to recycle something, you need to put some energy in, and you're going to reuse something, you need to put some energy in. If you can biodegrade it, then there's a lot less energy you can need to give. In fact, you could even get some energy out of this for when it's biodegrading. Maybe it gives us some gases we can use. So maybe there's something in this biodegrading. Okay, so we could use that. And then when we're talking about ethical choices, maybe people are picking things that are biodegradable because they're thinking maybe a big influence, and maybe the big influence of this is the fact that maybe this is a part of this is linked to market pull. So maybe people are saying, I want my stuff to be biodegradable, I want it to be that, and I'm not going to buy it. So I'm going to buy my bamboo toothbrush here because I want it to be biodegradable. And we're going to use paper straws, not just because we're made to, but because we want these paper straws to be biodegradable. We want a reduction in the landfill site. We want a reduction in the waste. We want a reduced amount of plastics that are used. Okay, so we want them to biodegrade. So maybe there's a bit of market pull there as well. So things that you can include in there as well. And also, if you think biodegradable packaging, what are you probably directly against? Probably directly against plastics. So you can talk a bit about the problems with the harms of using plastics. So they're the kind of things I'd expect to be included in there. So fair trade, wages, fair wages, people, consistent wages, how it helps society, okay, with funding education, funding buildings, funding healthcare, and helping equality. So lots in fair trade to do with society. Recycled links to more environmental bits, and in that we're talking about reducing waste, reduction in the amount of products that are made, reduction in transport needs, okay, and possibly some examples in there to do with electronic goods that are refurbished. Then biodegradable, talk about stuff breaking down naturally, which reduces the energy we need to either dispose of products and reduce the amount in landfill. Again, the driving force for that might be marketable, better education, and maybe you could even link a thing like Blue Planet with the scene of plastics and the damage it does. So they're the three kind of core things I think we would include in questions like that.